Hello, and welcome everyone to another series of emotional intelligence work. We have been coming to you over the last several months, really speaking specifically about emotional intelligent um, things, as whether it relates to relationships, whether it relates to your career, whether it relates to your finances. This is the space where you will be able to hear emotional intelligence in all things. And so I am so excited today because I have the profound opportunity to be able to welcome another one of our guests on the show. Now, he came to the emotional intelligent home a couple months ago. And since then, he has been doing great things. And I'm so excited to introduce our guest and our discussion for tonight. And it is being able to, of course, have a human experience in the digital era. And so I want to talk a little bit about James because last time he came and he spoke about one of his books, but he's written another book since then. He has been in the customer care industry for close to 20 years. And he have worked with organizations such as Walmart, Sprint Wireless, Home Depot, and is a current employee of FIFA. And so also wanted to let you know, James and his team, they have also been recognized by Newsweek, by Sprint Wireless and Home Depot as a leader within his respective industry. And so he has managed contact centers domestically as well as internationally. And some of these places, I'm telling you, I can't wait till I travel, but he's been to places such as Jamaica, Belize, not only that, but South Africa, which that's a place I want to go to, Cape Town specifically, but also the Philippines. He's also a Six Sigma Black belt. And so in his respective field, he's worked in a lot of different areas in senior leadership as far as training and quality and operations. He's aided in the development of contact centers. And get this, from 900 to over 3,000 employees. Talk about a responsibility on your hands. And then aside from this corporate experience, James has also been a sports writer for 8 years, working with CBS Interactive and you name it, the Miami Heat. So he also published his first book in 2015, which is called Get Out of Your Own Way. I am so honored and so blessed to bring James on the stage as we discuss one of his new books, which is actually called The Helpful Leader. And so, James, thank you so much. Welcome to the stage.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm well. I'm so excited, James, because number one, I'm going to just ask you a couple of rapid fire questions for the people that may not know you, right? We want to
Mhm.
kind of give them a little bit of something. Okay. So you ready for this?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, cool. So 99 jams or hot 105?
Hot 105.
Hot 105. Very interesting.
Just
Okay.
because they had me on a guest, rest in peace, Jill Tracy. I was on her show many years ago. So,
Okay. So hot 105 it is. Okay. Alonzo Mourning or Dwayne Wade?
ooh, D Wade.
Oh, okay. I thought you was gonna I thought you was gonna choose something different in there. Pat Riley or Eric Spoelstra?
Ooh, Riley.
Okay. All right. Cool. Are you a morning person or evening person?
Uh, Morning person.
Okay. What book are you reading now?
I am rereading the book that I wrote, The Helpful Leader.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much. Listen, we're gonna get into the book, but because you are a sports writer, you
Sure.
know, I gotta throw this in there really quick because I'm also a sports person. Bam! just had an 83-point game, right?
Yeah.
So I wanted to know your thoughts on that achievement, and we're going to go right into that helpful leader because he's become one of the leaders on the team, and so he's been able to do the things that he's doing because of the leadership that he's brought to the Miami Heat after there's been a lot of changes that's been happening in the roster and things of that nature. So what are some of your thoughts on that recent 83-point performance from Bam?
I'm happy for him. I think early in his career, we didn't know if he was a forward or a center. And so I think, he's an efficient player. We know that now. And that's
Yeah,
kind of similar when D Wade started. D Wade was never a true shooting guard and he
that's
was
true.
never a true point guard. I always like to say he was the first ATH. He was the first athlete in the NBA that really made a name for himself. But I love what Bam is doing. Shout out to his record breaking moment less than a month ago. Man, I think he earned it. I think anytime you can score over 80 points anywhere, it's commendable. And I love what he's doing. Not only that too, I believe if not already, he either is or is about to be the Heat's all-time leading rebounder as well.
Oh my goodness. Now,
And yeah.
I'm gonna stop because I felt myself about to start going into some other basketball things. So I'm gonna stop because I'm like, this is not what the show is about. So, but one of the things that you wrote recently, of course, is the helpful leader.
Hmm.
And we know that Bam would not be able to be that leader on a team if he didn't have certain attributes, right? And one of the things that, we are being plagued with now is all of the AI and the digital arena and this abundance of information that is now available to anyone that is simply a click away. And so I just want to hear from your perspective. You wrote a book in 2015. Can you just give a little snippet of what your book was about and how it may have even progressed into the book that you wrote for 2026?
Yeah, good question. Thank you for asking and thank you for having me as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so the book that I published in 2015 is called Get Out of Your Own Way. And the subtitle is Purpose Over Self. My purpose is greater than myself.
Okay.
And for me, it's a faith-based piece. I'm a Christian man. I'm a pastor by vocation. And I firmly believe that we all are here for a purpose. Every single person living and breathing has a specific assignment on this earth. No one's here by accident. And it was at the time, and still is, but at the time, it was my desire to help people understand that. And so, coupled with my testimony and with the studies that I went through and learned at that time in 2015, Get Out of Your Own Way was released and it was received really well, and we're grateful for it.
Wow. Wow. What was one of the main reasons why you wrote that book? Why was that so relevant at that time?
Thank you for asking. Well, because I had always known that I was destined for greatness, and not from an arrogant standpoint. Like when I was little, I was told that my mom can remember, being on trips and things that I would say where she would look at me like,
Yeah.
that shouldn't come out of a mouth of an 8-year-old. And so, and it was just kind of prophesied and spoken over my life that I was going to break generational curses. And so for me, but I had underachieved. I
Yeah.
lived in my own way, followed what I wanted to do, and by virtue, didn't really live the purpose that I was created for. And so for me, once I realized that and my heart was illuminated, I wanted to help other people recognize A, their purpose, B, where they are in the moment, and C, give them an opportunity to either continue headed towards living out a purpose-filled life or to begin to.
I was just facilitating a class earlier today. You're talking about purpose and that power of purpose. And one of the things that I was saying to them is that you even GPS, you cannot go anywhere without putting a destination in place.
It's good.
And many times in life, we want to get to certain places, but we don't want to but we don't have a clear vision
Right.
of where we want to go and what we want to do. And even GPS says if you want me to help you get to a certain place, you have to at least put in your destination. Right.
Right.
And now I can give you multiple ways in which you can get to that destination, but I can't help you if you don't have a vision. And I believe vision and purpose goes hand in hand. There's no way that you're going to be able to fulfill the things that you are purposed for if you don't have a vision. There is a biblical verse that says that we perish for lack of vision, right? And so I'm so excited. And I think it. Listen, if you're not familiar, for anyone that is listening right now, if you are not familiar, and if you have already not gotten his book in 2015, which talks about your purpose, that's something that is still available on Amazon and where all books are sold. Correct, James?
Yes, ma'am.
Absolutely. So you want to make sure that you are able, all of that information is going to be in the show notes. So you will be able to pick up a copy of your book anytime you want to get that copy. But now we fast forward to 2026. And now we're talking about the helpful leader, the helpful leader. And so this is a book where modern day leadership has really shifted from that top down authority towards a model of service and development. And so I know, James, you've been drawn for this book, you've been drawn on like your 20 years of experience from your global operations to not only sports journalism. And one of the things that you have said in this book is that a leader's success is measured by the growth of their people rather than just their own professional accolades. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the purpose. I think, why does someone lead, right? How do they what's their perception of their title, right? Whether it be a supervisor, a manager, director, or a C-suite individual, why are you there? Most people just see it as, they're there for their own selfish gain, not selfish gain, but their own self gain, right?
Yes.
I'm here to earn a check and provide for my family. There's nothing wrong with that, right? I commend that, I respect that. I would like to complement that and add thought to it that you're created for more than just earn a paycheck and provide for your family.
Yeah.
And so usually the one who's just there to provide for the family is a clock in, clock out. On the flip side, though, if there's turmoil, if there's toxicity, they grow into some sort of fear perspective. And because now a situation or a person has threatened their ability to earn a
Mm-hmm.
paycheck and provide for their family, now the interpersonal relationships start to get pretty complicated.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's always been at my heart to encourage people, and not just people in leadership positions, but anyone in life to understand that wherever they are, it's there for something greater. And I just want to go back to the first book and kind of bring basketball into it if I could.
Absolutely.
Michael Jordan in his Hall of Fame speech talked about the game, and he said something to the effect of that he would trade everything he had in that moment to just lace him up one more time.
Wow.
And
Wow.
when you think about Michael Jordan, for me, he's the closest thing to Batman we have. He doesn't
Yes.
fight crime, but he has a logo, and everybody knows that logo all over the world.
Yeah.
And I sat to myself and I heard that and I said, wow, here's someone who has everything that little old me would love to have.
Yeah.
And yet he still has a void in his heart. He
Yeah.
still feels incomplete. And
Yeah.
the game of basketball was where he felt most fulfilled. And so for me, that was a lot of inspiration behind Get Out of Your Own Way and
Yeah.
still behind The Helpful Leader because I know a lot of people in Fortune 500 companies that are miserable.
Yeah.
They're making high six figures. They have the Bentley, they have the mansion, right? They have the pretty family, but they're miserable.
Yeah.
There's no meaning to what they do. And so the helpful leader was born from a place of helping individuals understand that there should be meaning to what we do in the workplace, outside the workplace, and to not misunderstand the opportunity to lead people where you can make a difference in someone's life.
I love that you said that. I'm reminded of a Maya Angelou quote that says, people may forget what you did, people may forget what you said, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
You, right?
And so that's one of the beautiful things that you're talking about today is that at the end of the day, you can have everything and still have nothing
Yeah.
and still live an unfulfilled life because I don't know about you, James, but I don't know any burial ground where they have been buried with all their money can go with them. It'll be the first. It'll be one of the first graveyards that will get broken into. That's for sure. If all of the money all, all of the jewelry was there. I don't know of any graveyard that has that because you can't take that with you, right?
Yeah.
There's no value of it on the other side. And so there has to be more to life than just acquiring things. And so one of the things that you talk about in this book is emotional intelligence, which of course is my neck of the woods, but that's one of your foundational pillars. And there is a study that was done by Daniel Goleman, why your EQ is more valuable than your IQ. And one of the studies that he did was 75% to 75 to 90% of success in your life is driven not by your IQ, but by your EQ. And just in a class, I was talking about that today because most people think that if I get a degree, right? Like most people are taught, like as even as a child, that if I get good grades in school, then I'll be able to go to a good college. If I go to a good college, I'm going to be able to be a doctor, lawyer, nurse, And then if I'm able to have that type of course, that type of career, now my life is going to be better. But statistics don't show that that is what makes a good life, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so the thing about it is, one of the things that you talk about as the foundational pillars is three things. I just want you to try to touch on maybe one of them at this time. But you talk about self awareness,
Yeah.
right? And how leaders have to be able to understand their own motivations and their wounds before they can lead effectively. I want to ask you, James, because I know when I begin to write a book and I had to kind of live out certain experiences first.
Yeah.
Do you have a time where you found out about your wound or your motivation, and then once you were able to understand that, you were able to do the work to be able to lead your team more effectively? When did self awareness start for you?
Yeah, great question. It started when I learned about emotional intelligence. I believe it was in about 2010, maybe 2011. I was working at a job and I had just experienced a work-related heartbreak because I applied for a supervisor role. I thought I had all the charisma and the character and the workplace relationships necessary to get the job. And I went in the interview and I was killing it from a personality standpoint. And then everything changed when he asked me a question about critical thinking. And I answered the question to the best of my ability, but I had already felt the shift in the room. And I walked out of the room not as confident. A few days later, I get an email I wasn't given the position. It was the first time in my life that my charisma and personality didn't work out in my favor. However, about a few months later, I was in a corporate training class at that same job, and I learned about this term that changed my life, and it was emotional intelligence. And as I learned about it more, I started to look within myself and recognize that I had wounds in my heart. I had certain blockages that were preventing me from living, like I said earlier, that purpose-filled life, being destined for greatness, as some would say. And so I think for me, that was the catalyst of Jim Rohn, who is the mentor of Tony Robbins, talked about a phrase that you and I are familiar with. It's a phrase, that goes something like this: "Hey, you take care of me, and I'll take care of you."
Yeah.
And Mr. Rohn didn't really appreciate how it was framed, and so he kind of remixed it a little bit. And he said, "How about this?" He said, "Let's try this. I'm gonna take care of me for you. You
Yeah.
take care of you for me."
Yeah.
And when I learned more about emotional intelligence, that was the beginning of really truly living a purpose-filled life and taking care of me, doing the necessary work deep in my heart to recognize through self-awareness the wounds that I had that started in my childhood. You talked about, the social norms and the constructs, go to college, this, that, and the third. And so I really had to do some self-inventory. And I think that's what's necessary today in the digital age is, I wrote The Helpful Leader to help preserve interpersonal relationships,
Yeah.
to help keep at a high priority the necessity of, like you talked about with Miss Angelo's quote, of how we make people feel. I
Yeah.
think that, AI is great and the digital age is going to do wonders, if not already. But what we have to hold on to is interpersonal relationships, the human to human connection,
Yeah.
certain things that money can't buy or technology can't recreate.
Yeah. I think that's so important because I, do, of course, personal and professional development. And people don't realize leaders, they get stuck in certain cycles,
Yeah.
right? I was just speaking with a leader recently, and she was sharing with me that she ended up losing one of the best people on her team.
Mm,
And one of the challenges was her leadership told her that she had gotten too comfortable with this young lady on her team, right? She had her cell phone number. She was calling her. Like it really crossed, the border of that leader as well as that that colleague experience. And so but she ended up saying, I don't know, there was just something about me. I just wanted to help her. I just wanted to do right. I felt like I was responsible for her. And I'm speaking to her and I'm saying to her that that comes from another place. That that need to be responsible for someone else and feel that they are, and you give them more access to yourself and you bend over backwards for them, that is not something that is normal, right? And so there's a wound there that needs to be healed because what you attract, you extract.
mm,
What you attract, you extract. And she didn't realize that she had actually brought in a replacement, and she had already gave the replacement her cell phone number. And
mm.
guess what that replacement was doing? Calling her
Yeah.
all through the night. And I'm like, you're gonna have to put boundaries in place, right? And I say, you're going to have to end up letting her know that you only gave her your personal number only for emergency purposes. And when I told her that, she cringed. She was like, like, I don't want to tell that to her. And I said, this is why you're going to have to do the work of the heart, because everyone that you hire, until you fix that wound in you, you won't be able to even create the workspace where other staff members feel comfortable and feel safe to be able to be authentically them when they're not giving you the same attention. And one of the things that you talk about in that EQ section is psychological safety.
Mhm.
Why do you think it is so important for leaders, especially in this digital age where a lot of people are not paying attention to the work of the heart? Why is psychological safety so important within a work environment?
Yeah, let me just say shout out to you for your hard work. I think we need more people that take a vested interest in their own heart. Psychological safety is important because when you talk about emotional intelligence, you talk about things like the amygdala hijack. And,
Mm-hmm.
God in his infinite wisdom designed us to protect ourselves from danger, right? And so whatever we see, whatever we hear, whatever we perceive as a threat, our brain is gonna kick into a gear without our permission, and it's gonna do what's necessary, and that's why you have fight, flight, freeze, and so all these different reactions to what we perceive as a danger. This is where psychological safety comes in. You can have an employee with a master's degree. He or she can be a hard worker with a lot of experience, but if there's a toxic environment, if there's a, person on the team who isn't really being a team player, no, regardless of what they know intellectually, that amygdala hijack can and will kick in if they feel like there's a threat, if they feel like a comment is made that's offensive, right? And even when you talk about offense, one thing that not many people consider is that you can offend someone intentionally, but you can also offend them unintentionally.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's the unintentional offense, the invisible bullies, as we call it, that people might not see, but they experience. And when they experience it, that hijack is going to kick in and now they're going to go into self-preservation mode. And so for me, one of the signs of an effective leader is someone that can create psychological safety, an environment where their team feels supported, validated, heard, encouraged, more than that, protected. There's
Yeah.
no greater feeling from a subordinate when they see their superior fight for them.
Yeah.
And that, I think, along with many other principles, can create psychological safety.
It's so important because I can even shift this because as we're talking about leadership, leadership is influence.
Hmm.
John Maxwell is, talks about leadership being influence, right? And so even if you're not a leader at your place of employment, it doesn't mean you're not a leader.
Mm-mm.
You're a leader at home, right?
Mhm.
And I know we've been talking about leadership within the work environment, of course, because of the digital era. But I want to shift a little bit.
Sure.
And I want to talk about the leader as a father. I want to talk about the leaders that's a mother. I want to talk about the leaders that is a husband or wife or a leader in ministry. Can you shift gears a little bit? And as you
Mhm.
talk about psychological safety and even the power of being self aware. Why is it important that even when we get out of the work environment, how these principles that what you're talking about also transcends into your everyday life?
Yeah, great question because you're right. The leadership that I talk about in my book is not exclusive to that of corporate, right? You could be an older sibling in a group of siblings, right? An older cousin. Just I love the way you said influence. And so it's interesting because sometimes for some people, and I used to be one of them, who we are at work is not who we are at home. And
True.
and 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 sometimes, we either treat our kids better than we treat our employees, or we treat our employees better than we treat our children or our spouses. And so for me, I'm married. I've been married 11 years this past January. Father of four. My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 6. I believe wholeheartedly that the principles that I talk about and the helpful leader that, yes, seem to speak more towards people in the workplace do apply. Principles like meeting people where they are. Let's start there, right? I have a 21-year-old and we're having conversations about how he's managing his bills and being a good steward of his own apartment. An 18-year-old who's just starting college and we're talking about what this new environment that is college is like. And then I have an 8-year-old and a 6-year-old who, we're teaching them how to just not fight and how to be calm,
I love it.
And so I have to meet them where they are
Yeah.
in order to deliver that message effectively. My home, there's the rules don't change. Let's say there's 10 rules in the house. Those rules never change. But the way that I deliver those rules has to constantly be brought back to the drawing board, right? Because it's my responsibility to ensure that my children understand me more than it's their job to understand me because
Yeah.
I'm coming up from a place of a 43-year-old talking to a 6-year-old. And so it's the same with my wife, it's the same with my mother, my siblings, my fraternity brothers, my friends. Everybody has an opportunity to consider themselves a leader, and it's a travesty for
Yeah.
people who don't. Because at the end of the day, even if you don't have a family, if you don't have siblings, if you're not married, you don't have kids, there's still one individual that you're called to lead, and that's the person that they see in the mirror.
Yeah.
And
Absolutely.
like you said, the more effective you can be at leading that person in the mirror, eventually you will have other people that will want to know more about you and learn from you. And so it totally transcends into the home.
Michael Jackson had a song, I'm starting with the man in the mirror. I'm asking him to change his ways. And no message could have been any clearer. If you want to make a world a better place, take a look at yourself and make a change. And so it has to start with the man in the mirror. And I think that is the challenge because a lot of people want to point fingers at everybody else. They
Sure.
want to blame, and I say this all the time, they want to blame their mama, their trauma, and
Mhm.
everybody else for where they are in life instead of taking responsibility for where they are and deciding and being intentional and moving in a different direction. One of the areas that you talk about in the book that requires so much intentionality, and it is one of the main reasons why many relationships fail, and that is a lack of communication. Right. And you talk about communication in your book and you talk about different ways of communicating. But one of the things that I wanted to really park, for a few moments on is you begin to talk about
Mm.
authenticity in your communication, being able to lead with a level of transparency,
Yeah.
even when you are facing whether that is organizational pressures, whether that means you're facing financial pressures at home, whether that means you are facing um, pressures, immigration pressures, right? Even what's going on right now, there's a part of you that has to be able to lead with a level of transparency, or of course, people are not going to be able to relate to you. And so, can you just talk about the power of being authentic in whatever space that you are in?
Yeah, it's a good question. I believe it's an ex-president that had this quote, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that to me is foundational when it comes to authenticity. I fell into the trap, and for everyone listening here who's an aspiring public speaker, keynote speaker, I fell into the trap of thinking that my gifted ability to talk made me a great communicator
Wow.
until I learned how horrible of a listener I was.
Wow.
And it's only been for the last like 5 to 6 years where I've really dialed in on the art of listening. And here's why I think that's important, because the more I listen, the more the other person knew that I care.
Yeah.
And that's where authenticity lives and breathes, right? It's in that exchange of, man, I'm interested genuinely in what you're saying. People know when someone's not present. People, you're having a conversation with someone, they're on their phone, they're looking at their watch, they're looking everywhere but you, right? And so being authentic is essential because again, when you talk about leading people, especially adults, my children have to do what I say.
Yeah.
My employees don't.
Yeah.
They can go find another job if they want, but they don't have to do that. I'm not their father. So at that point, then it becomes a choice. Are
Yeah.
they going to do it out of fear or are they going to do it out of trust?
Yeah.
And it's never
Yeah.
been any part of my heart or personality to be someone who influences others by way of fear.
Yeah.
It has to be trust. But in order for there to be trust, there has to be relationship. And in order for there to be relationship, there has to be communication. And in order for there to be communication, there has to be a desire for me, the one who's initiating the experience, to listen more, to take more of an interest in the other person versus overly explain why you should trust me. No, I want to take an interest in your life. I want to know about you. I want to know what you feel. I want to know what you think so that naturally and organically,
Yeah.
absent of me telling you you have to, you make the decision to trust me. And that begins the domino effect of a healthy interpersonal relationship, whether it be at work or at home.
Yeah. One of the things that I love that you said is that Um, you got to be able to, of course, start within yourself. You got to begin to create that psychological safety for authenticity. No one is going to pay attention to what you say when you are not being intentional in what you're saying and how you're saying, the time you're saying, the
Mhm,
environment in which you're saying it.
mhm.
And sometimes, a lot of the times, as leaders, what we'll do is, we'll say certain things and we expect for people to get it. We expect for people
Sure.
to, and then all of a sudden, and then we wonder why, they, um the morale of the team is low. People are calling off, people are not engaged. I think there's a study by the Gallup poll that says that only 15% of employees are actually engaged at work.
Wow.
Can you believe that? According
Yeah.
to the Gallup poll,
Crazy.
only 15% of people are actually engaged at work. Why are they not engaged at work? Because of some of the things that we're talking about right here. The communication, one of the things that, I talk about in communication is that, a lot of the times, it's not that you're not saying the right words. I love how you said, James, it's an art form. That's
Yeah.
actually one of the ways that I describe communication as well. It's art. And so
Oh,
when you think about art, you think about there's multiple ways to show the beauty of something, right? Like you can use a pencil, you can use a brush, you can use a deep stroke,
yeah.
there's an art form, there's an
Sharpening.
art, right? And so, and the issue is that a lot of the times we don't take the time to find out what's the best art form for that person that we're speaking to. We just expect for them to get it. Just get it. Like, I just want you to get where we are, and it doesn't work that way. And so, especially with people under a lot of pressure of what's going on in this world, you know what, they want authenticity. And so thank you so much for just breaking that down, of that authenticity. And it goes across the board, because at the end of the day, it's not the fact that you don't have the words to communicate. It's not. A lot of the times miscommunication happens because of the energy that you put behind your words.
Yeah.
So if a person is saying, I'm depressed, you're like, what? Like, that makes no that doesn't work. The energy is not matching what's coming out of your mouth. And a
Sure.
lot of the time, subconsciously, our energy is saying one thing, but our language is saying something else. And so that takes a certain level of awareness to ensure that those two collide. And so one of the issues is that we are not paying attention to those things, and what happens is conflict begins to arise. You begin to talk a little bit about conflict resolution in your book, and I got to touch on one of the areas that is just so beautiful to me. And one of the things that you talk about is graceful navigation. Graceful navigation and moving through the workplace, and that workplace tensions without ego. And there takes a certain level of grace to be able to do that. Please, anybody that is listening right now, they're like, grace, conflict resolution. The math is not mathing. And so, can you please just kind of shed some light on how does that look?
Man, it definitely doesn't happen without internal work being done on my part first. And let me just share one of the greatest growth moments in my relationship with my children isn't when they do what I tell them to do.
Hmm.
It's when I mess up and I apologize to them
Yeah.
and I ask them for forgiveness, and out of their mouth they say, I forgive you, Daddy.
Oh,
That to me helps us grow in our relationship a whole lot more.
yeah.
I incorporated the context of grace in the book because I think, yes, when you're dealing, again, you're dealing with people, you're gonna unintentionally offend someone. My wife and I unintentionally offend each other at least 6 times a week.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, or
not,
more.
it's never on purpose. It's never like meant to anything. It's just what we're processing, how we're processing, what we say, how we say. And sometimes it just comes off wrong,
Yeah.
but there has to be grace. There has to be an understanding. One of the key central focuses of grace in my book, The Helpful Leader, is when you have to terminate someone,
Yeah.
because that's a reality.
Yeah.
And I've had, as much as I'm grateful for having the fortunate privilege of having senior leader roles, what's came with that is having to let people go.
Yeah.
And it's some of the most gut-wrenching conversations I've had, but I've learned, and my faith is the number one reason why I'm able to do that, and I strive to do that.
Yeah.
I've been able to learn how to terminate people gracefully, right? It goes back to art. When you talk about, my dad's an artist. When you talk about art, you have to visualize. You look
Mm.
at that canvas and you say, this is what I want to create. I want to create a house with a red roof and blue doors. And what do? You look for the colors on your palette and you look for the specific paintbrush style and you go to work so that you
Yeah.
can have that house with a red roof and blue doors. So for me, in a conversation where I know that I have to terminate someone and they don't know what's coming, I have to visualize what kind of conversation do I want to have.
Yeah.
And most leaders miss the mark and I want to give them grace now and say,
Yeah.
because it is a challenging conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes you just want to get on with it. I just want to get, I can't, I like this person. They got a family. They have a kid in college. I can't even imagine if I was in their shoes. So you just want to get it over with.
Yeah.
But I think you miss a critical opportunity to I don't want to say reestablish, but to remind someone of their dignity.
Yeah.
To allow someone to leave that room even though they're losing their job, still with a sense of purpose, still with an
Yeah.
understanding that it's not you, it's just that the skill set that you have doesn't fit the needs that we want.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that that person is less skillful. But
Right.
in order to make that conversation as quick as possible, because it is gut-wrenching, a lot of leaders that I've experienced, they just stick to the facts. Let me get your badge, and you walk them out. And so for me, when it comes to conflict, there's always got to be grace. There's always got to be compassion and understanding. But that's not innate. I believe
Yeah.
those are learned behaviors. And
They
I
are.
think we need to learn how to walk in those behaviors.
Yeah. I think it's so important because you have to decide to give someone grace. You have to
Yeah,
decide to be patient. And I talk about all the time how there's a different your emotions are triggered based on your five senses, right?
yeah,
You don't have to teach a baby to be happy, sad, all of that, all of those things, disgusted, surprised. However, you have to decide to be patient. You have to
yeah,
decide to
yeah,
have joy. You have to
yeah,
decide to love. These are not emotions. These are things that you have to decide to do, and it is operating in these virtues that actually makes the difference, not only in your life but in the lives of other people. And showing grace to people, I think, is so important because we're going to always be in a situation where we're going to need grace.
yeah,
Always. We're never going to
yeah,
get it right all of the time. And one of the things that you talk about with that grace is being able to manage some difficult behaviors,
yeah.
addressing even some type passive, some specific framework for some passive aggressive type of behaviors and
Sure.
things of that nature. Can you just touch a little bit of how you'll be able to resolve conflict with some of those difficult behaviors?
6 months into my tenure with FIFA, I was nominated for a team MVP award.
Wow.
And it really blessed my heart because it spoke to a lot of what my core values are, right? This person, it was anonymous. The person said something like, he's like a mentor, you know what I mean? Not just a supervisor. The reason I say that is because, again, the painter, from the first day that I started, I wanted to establish myself as this kind of leader, whatever
Yeah.
this means, right? And so every relationship was almost intentionally crafted in that area, right?
Yeah.
So when going back to terminating someone, right, or dealing with people who are passive aggressive or people who, just are not open, right, who are blind to their own ways, it starts with the relationship you build.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have a relationship regardless, and that's gonna be I'm your boss.
Yeah.
That's the relationship.
Yeah.
And you, as my subordinate, you have a choice. You can either keep it like that or you can accept my invitation for something just a little deeper. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean that I'm gonna be your best friend, but what it does mean is that you can trust me. It means you can confide in me,
Yeah.
right? That one of the things that we talk about in the helpful leader is drawing from the helping professions,
Yeah.
the therapists, the counselors, the social workers. For all the people watching this now and raising their eyebrows saying, I ain't nobody's therapist, you're right. You are not a certified counselor or therapist, but here's
Right.
what you can do. You can learn from them on how to listen. You
Yeah.
can learn from them on how to have compassion. You
Yeah.
can learn from them to recognize that there's a difference between what's being said and what's being meant.
Right.
But the only way you know that is by knowing the person. So for me, the way I navigated those difficult conversations, they were fairly easy because I had already established relationship. And
Yeah.
even if the person didn't want to reach back and from an interpersonal standpoint, right, and engage with knowing about your family and everything, at the very least, they knew that I respected them. They
Right.
knew that I trusted them. That I treated them the same way I treated everyone else, right? And so at least we had that established. And so whether it comes to terminating someone, writing someone up, dealing with someone who's having issues with other people in the team, those conversations are easier to have when you have an established foundational relationship
Yeah.
with the people that you're around.
Yeah. I mean, thank you so much, James. This world is all about connection. It is all about being able to connect with people, not just on a, on a conscious level, but on the subconscious level. And there has to be patterns that are created to connect with people
Mhm.
in a healthy way from a subconscious place. There has to be a level of awareness. There has to be a level of intentionality. And honestly, there has to be desire. There has to be desire. And so for the leaders that are out here, for the leaders that are saying, you know what, James, I hear what you're saying. I hear you're talking about conflict, you're talking about communication, you're talking about EQ. Like I don't know all of these different things. Like this is something that I'm not familiar with. Can you give them even, because I know Rome wasn't built in one day,
Sure.
what is one thing that they can actually begin to do, even starting today? What is one thing, if they are a leader, whether they're a leader in their home, whether they're a leader at their business, what is one thing that they can begin to do today in which they'll be able to become a helpful leader?
I got to give credit to my pastor who has downloaded this for the last few years into us. And I was just talking to this about with him a few days ago. One of the highest scientific forms of intelligence is people who think about what they're thinking about.
Mm,
I would encourage anyone listening who's either starting in leadership or you've been 40 years in leadership to take self-assessments, do some personal inventory, right? Care enough about your family, care enough about your coworkers, care enough about your teammates to the point where you're constantly measuring yourself to see if you're living up to your own standards.
yeah,
And if you don't have standards, get a mentor. We talked about two MJs on this call.
yeah,
Both MJs changed the world.
yeah,
One MJ had everything you think you can imagine and you would want to have, but still had a void.
yeah,
And the other one used his gifting to let people know that the one in the mirror, that's the one you need to convince, and that's also the one that you need to defeat.
yeah. Very
But it
true.
starts there. It starts with looking within yourself, doing the necessary work like I did when I first learned about emotional intelligence. Back to that Jim Rohn quote. Don't help me and I'll help you. Let me help myself
Yeah,
so that I can help you.
yeah,
It starts there.
yeah. Thank you so much for that. I remember, as I wrote my book, Heart Work of the Soul, that also would be for purchase in the show notes. But in order for me to write that book, I had to go through some things. I had to have some hard conversations. Why? Because I was making decisions that subconsciously after I'm like, oh my gosh, why do I keep doing this?
Yeah.
Why do I? And I don't want to do it anymore, but I don't know how to get out of it. And there's some of you that's listening right now. Have you gotten to the place where you are sick and tired of being sick and tired? Have you gotten to the place where you say, you know what, I need to be better for the people that I'm stewarding, whether that's at my job, whether that's at my home? I want to be better. Well, one of the ways in which you can be better is one of the scriptures says that we also perish for lack of knowledge, right? And so, one of the things that I would encourage you to do as well, in addition to what James said, because it all starts here, you have to decide to do it. Nobody's going to do it for you, but definitely pick up a copy of The Helpful Leader, pick up a copy of Heart Work of the Soul, and then get a mentor, get a coach. There are things that you can do so that way, just one step, I promise you, one step will can completely change the trajectory of your life. James, I want to throw this back to you. Is there any final words that you would like to give anyone that is listening?
Yeah, one of the quote from my first book, Get Out of Your Own Way, dreams are seen through the eyes of the soul, but only carried out by the soles of our feet.
Mm,
Everybody on this earth has a purpose, and it doesn't have to be in the corporate sector. It can be a coach making an impact in the lives of 9-year-olds, or it can be a mother and a father who adopted two babies. Regardless of what it is, we all have an imprint, we all have a legacy, and the greatest travesty in someone's life is to live and not know what they're living for or who they're living for.
yeah,
And so, as you said, Joanna, I just would encourage everyone to really take some stock within themselves and understand what that looks like, to learn more about that, and to for not for 1 second belittle or devalue their contribution to society, because we're contributing to society in one way or another.
yeah.
We're either helping it be better or we're helping it be worse. We get to choose.
James, thank you so much. It has been such a rich conversation. It has been such a dynamic conversation. It is a conversation that people can continue to go back and listen to. If you like this channel, please like, subscribe, and share this post. This is information that a lot of people are not talking about. And this is the very core foundation of you being the best version of you that you can be. And so I want to thank you so much, James, for joining. I want to thank you, everyone else, for watching. I will see you next time on our emotional intelligence series. And I cannot wait. I cannot wait to hear in the comments some of the things that you are going to actively begin to do as a result of listening to this podcast. Be blessed, and I will catch you on the next series. Bye bye, everyone.